Liam Stanton had spent years believing he was incapable of having children. It wasn't just a medical fact, it was something he had come to accept, a quiet truth that shaped the way he lived his life. No attachments. No family. Just business, success, and control. But all of that shattered in an instant. It happened in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, in a coffee shop he had visited 100 times before. He had walked in expecting nothing but caffeine and routine. Instead, he saw her, the woman he had loved and lost. And sitting beside her, with identical blonde curls and piercing blue eyes, were two little girls. Twins. His heart stopped. His world tilted. Because even before Ella lifted her gaze and met his with quiet, undeniable recognition, he knew the truth. They were his. And he had never known they existed. Liam Stanton never believed in fate. He believed in control, in strategy, in the idea that every success in life came from careful planning and relentless effort. Nothing had ever been handed to him, and he had built his empire brick by brick, never relying on luck or chance. That's why he didn't believe in miracles, in second chances, or in things happening for a reason. That belief had only solidified 4 years ago when a doctor had given him the news that changed his life: he was infertile. There would be no heir, no child carrying his name, no one to continue his legacy. At first, it had been a shock, but over time, he convinced himself it didn't matter. He had his company, his success, and all the wealth he could ever need. What was the point of mourning something he had never really wanted in the first place? At least, that was the lie he had told himself. Now, at 36 years old, Liam had everything a man could ask for: an empire spanning industries, respect in the business world, and more money than he could ever spend. He was used to expensive suits, elite business meetings, and nights spent in high-end restaurants where waiters knew his name before he even walked through the door. Life was predictable, and he liked it that way. But predictability shattered the moment he stepped into his usual coffee shop one afternoon and saw her. Ella. His chest tightened instantly. It had been 4 years since he had last seen her, but she looked almost exactly the same. Her golden blonde hair still cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders, and her blue eyes still held that quiet strength that had drawn him in so many years ago. She was sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, lost in thought. But she wasn't alone. Liam's breath caught when he saw them. 2 little girls sat at the table with her, identical in every way. Blonde hair, blue eyes, delicate features that mirrored Ella's. But there was something else, something that made his pulse pound in his ears. Their expressions, the sharpness of their gazes, the way one of them tilted her head slightly as she spoke, it was familiar. Too familiar. His own reflection stared back at him in miniature form. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His mind immediately rejected the possibility. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. And yet, there they were. He stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. He had walked into this cafe expecting nothing more than an overpriced cup of coffee, another routine moment in his carefully controlled life. Instead, he had walked into a past he thought he had buried, and a future he never imagined could exist. Then, as if she could feel his stare, Ella lifted her head and met his gaze. Her eyes widened slightly, shock flashing across her face before she quickly masked it. But it was too late. She knew he had seen them. She knew he had already figured it out. Liam's heart pounded as he forced his legs to move, closing the distance between them in just a few strides. He stopped at her table, his shadow falling over them as he looked down at the 2 little girls. They were small, delicate, maybe 4 years old. Exactly the amount of time he and Ella had been apart. Ella's hands tightened slightly around her coffee cup, but she lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with the quiet defiance he remembered so well. "Liam," she said, her voice steady, but he could hear the tension beneath it. His throat felt tight, his mind spinning with too many questions to process. He swallowed hard, forcing out the only words that mattered. Are they mine? Ella's lips parted slightly, but no words came. And in that silence, he already knew the answer. Ella's silence told Liam everything he needed to know. The world around him seemed to fade into the background, the hum of conversations, the clinking of coffee cups, the distant sound of the barista calling out orders. None of it mattered. All he could focus on was the woman sitting before him and the two little girls who had just rewritten everything he thought he knew about his life. The twins. His twins. He could feel his pulse pounding, the weight of this moment pressing against his chest like a force he wasn't prepared for. He had spent years believing he could never have children, years convincing himself that it didn't matter. But now, staring at these two small girls with their identical blue eyes, the same shade as his own, he knew that had been a lie. It had always mattered. Finally, Ella exhaled, setting her cup down with careful precision. She glanced at the girls, who were still oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. One of them was playing with a sugar packet, folding it neatly, while the other was absent-mindedly tapping her spoon against the table. They were comfortable. Secure. They had no idea what was happening. Ella turned back to him, and for the first time, he saw something unguarded in her expression. Not fear. Not anger. Just quiet resignation. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're yours. Liam felt like the ground beneath him had shifted. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind, but none of them made sense. He had prepared himself for every possible scenario in life. Business failures, market crashes, betrayals, success beyond imagination. But not this. Never this. How? He finally asked, his voice rough. I mean. I was told, he stopped himself, shaking his head. It doesn't matter what I was told. You knew. And you never told me. Ella flinched slightly but kept her gaze steady. I wanted to, she admitted. I almost did, so many times. But I knew what your life was like, Liam. I knew what was most important to you. His jaw clenched. You had no right to make that decision for me. She let out a slow breath, glancing at the girls again before lowering her voice. Can we not do this here? Liam's hands curled into fists at his sides. He had never been a man who lost control, but right now, every instinct in him was fighting the urge to demand answers he should have had years ago. But she was right. This wasn't the place. He looked at the twins, really looked at them. They were perfect. How had he missed this? How had 4 years passed without him knowing they existed? One of them, he wasn't sure which, turned her head and looked directly at him. Her bright blue eyes studied him with quiet curiosity, as if sensing something different in the air. Mommy, she asked, tilting her head. Who's that? Ella hesitated for only a second before offering her daughter a small smile. This is Liam, she said gently. An old friend. Liam stiffened. That wasn't what he was. He wasn't just some old friend, he was their father. And she knew it. He forced himself to breathe. This wasn't something he could fix in an instant. As much as he wanted to demand the truth, to fight for the years he had lost, there was something more important right now. The girls. He nodded slightly at the little girl. Hi, he said, keeping his voice calm. What's your name? She hesitated, then grinned. I'm Lily. She pointed to her sister. That's Olivia. Lily and Olivia. His daughters. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his emotions in check. Nice to meet you, Lily. Olivia. Olivia looked up from her spoon, blinking at him. You have blue eyes like us. Liam let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. He was still in shock, but hearing her say it, acknowledging the connection, made something shift inside him. I guess I do, he said. Ella cleared her throat. Liam, she said quietly, drawing his attention back to her. If you really want to talk, tonight. 8 o'clock. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad, scribbling something on it before tearing off the page and sliding it across the table. Liam took it without a word. It was an address. Come alone, she added. He met her gaze, reading between the lines. She wasn't ready for him to just step into their lives, not yet. But she was giving him a chance. And for now, that would have to be enough. Liam spent the rest of the day in a daze, his mind unable to focus on anything but the conversation he had just had with Ella. His daughters. He had daughters. The thought felt foreign and overwhelming, as if his entire life had just been rewritten in an instant. No amount of business success, no perfectly laid out plan had ever prepared him for something like this. He sat in his office, staring at the slip of paper Ella had given him. An address. A time. It wasn't just an invitation to talk, it was an opening, a chance to step into the life he had unknowingly missed. But it wasn't just about him. It was about them. The little girls who had no idea who he really was. Who had spent 4 years living in a world without him. And now, he had to figure out how to fix that. By the time evening rolled around, Liam was more nervous than he had ever been in his life. He had walked into boardrooms filled with ruthless executives, faced high-stakes negotiations that determined the fate of multimillion-dollar deals. And yet, none of those moments had ever left his hands trembling the way they were now as he stood outside Ella's house. It was a modest home, nothing extravagant, but warm and inviting. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow over the small front yard. He hesitated for only a moment before taking a breath and knocking on the door. A few seconds later, it opened, and there she was. Ella. She looked different in the soft light, more relaxed than she had been in the cafe. But there was still caution in her expression, a guardedness that told him she wasn't sure if she could trust him yet. She stepped aside, motioning for him to come in. Lily and Olivia are asleep, she said quietly as she led him into the living room. Liam glanced around, taking in the space. There were small signs of them everywhere, tiny shoes lined up near the door, a few stuffed animals scattered across the couch, a framed drawing on the wall that had 2 figures holding hands with the word mommy written above them. His chest tightened. Ella gestured for him to sit, and he did, though he felt strangely out of place. She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. So, she said after a long pause. Where do you want to start? Liam exhaled slowly, trying to gather his thoughts. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say, 1,000 questions he wanted to ask. But only one mattered right now. Why didn't you tell me? Ella looked down for a moment before meeting his gaze again. I wanted to, she admitted. When I found out I was pregnant, I picked up the phone 100 times. But then I'd remember the way we ended things. You told me yourself that you didn't want a family. That you weren't built for that kind of life. Liam flinched at her words because he had said them. He had believed them back then. I thought I was doing the right thing, she continued. I thought if I told you, you'd feel obligated. And I didn't want that for them. I didn't want them to have a father who was only there because he felt like he had to be. Liam clenched his jaw. That wasn't your decision to make. Her expression hardened slightly. Maybe not. But I had to make it anyway. Silence stretched between them. Liam ran a hand over his face, trying to process everything. He wasn't angry, at least, not in the way he expected to be. He was frustrated, confused, but most of all, he was hurting. Not for himself, but for what had been lost. I missed 4 years of their lives, he said, his voice quieter now. 4 years I can never get back. Ella's face softened slightly. I know, she said. And I'm sorry for that. But they're happy, Liam. They have a good life. I've done my best to give them everything they need. Liam nodded, swallowing against the tightness in his throat. And what about what they need now? He asked. What if they need their father? Ella studied him for a long moment. Then you need to prove that you're ready for that. Liam straightened slightly. How? She sighed. Start slow. They don't know you yet. To them, you're just a stranger. You can't just walk in and expect them to suddenly be comfortable with you. I don't expect that, he said firmly. But I want to be in their lives, Ella. I want to know them. She hesitated but then nodded. All right, she said. We'll start small. You can spend time with them, see how things go. But, Liam, if you do this, you can't back out. You can't disappear. If you're in, you have to be all in. Liam met her gaze, knowing this was the moment that defined everything. He had built his life around careful decisions, around never committing to something unless he was absolutely sure. But for this, there was no hesitation. I'm in, he said. Completely. Ella held his gaze for a few more seconds before finally nodding. Then let's see where this goes. And just like that, Liam's life changed forever. The next morning, Liam woke up feeling different. It wasn't just the knowledge that his entire life had changed overnight, it was the weight of responsibility, the reality that he was now a father to 2 little girls who didn't even know him. The thought both terrified and grounded him in a way nothing else ever had. For years, he had lived his life with clear direction, moving from one success to another, never looking back. But now, there was something more important than business deals and corporate expansion. There were 2 small lives he had a chance to be part of, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure what his next move should be. Later that afternoon, he drove back to Ella's house. She had agreed to let him meet the girls properly, but she had been firm in her expectations, no pressure, no overwhelming introductions. Just a casual visit. Liam wasn't sure what a casual visit looked like when meeting his daughters for the first time, but he was willing to follow her lead. When he arrived, he hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the car. He had closed multi-million-dollar deals, negotiated with some of the most ruthless businessmen in the world, and yet nothing had ever made his hands shake like this. Ella opened the door before he could knock, glancing at him with an expression that was unreadable. She stepped aside, letting him in, and he was immediately hit with the warmth of a home. It was nothing like his sleek, modern penthouse. It was filled with soft colors, framed drawings on the walls, and a sense of comfort that he had never known in his own space. He followed Ella into the living room, where the twins were sitting on the floor, surrounded by crayons and coloring books. They were so small, so unaware of the magnitude of what was happening. Ella cleared her throat. Girls, we have a visitor today. Both of them looked up, their identical blue eyes locking onto him. Lily, the more expressive one, tilted her head slightly. Olivia simply blinked, observing him in quiet curiosity. Liam crouched down to their level, his heart pounding. Hey, he said, his voice softer than he had expected it to be. I'm Liam. Lily looked at Ella first, as if for permission, then back at him. You were at the cafe, she said. He nodded. Yeah, I was. Olivia's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Ella let out a quiet laugh. Because he's an old friend of mine, and he wanted to meet you both. Lily shrugged, seemingly satisfied with that answer, and went back to her coloring. Olivia, however, continued watching him, her small brows furrowing. Do you like coloring? Lily asked suddenly, holding up a crayon. Liam hesitated. I haven't colored in a long time. Lily handed him a blank sheet of paper as if that was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. You can start now. Ella raised an eyebrow at him, clearly amused, but said nothing. Liam took the crayon she offered and sat down properly, adjusting to the unfamiliar situation. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but for now, all that mattered was that they were letting him be there. They colored in silence for a while, Lily chattering occasionally about which colors were best for which parts of the picture. Olivia remained quiet but kept stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. After a while, Ella spoke. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Liam looked up at her, surprised. He hadn't expected to be invited to stay, not yet. But if she was offering, he wasn't about to turn it down. "I'd like that," he said. Dinner was a simple affair, spaghetti, which, as he quickly learned, was a favorite of both girls. Lily talked the entire time, telling him about her favorite cartoons, her stuffed animals, and how she didn't like green beans. Olivia remained more reserved, but by the time they were done eating, she was no longer watching him with suspicion. As he helped clear the dishes, he realized something. He had spent years thinking he wasn't meant for this kind of life, that he wasn't built to be a father. But sitting there, surrounded by messy plates and the sound of Lily giggling at something Olivia had whispered, he felt something settle inside him. He wanted this. He wanted them. And for the first time, he understood that no amount of money or power could ever compare to the chance of being their father. Over the next few weeks, Liam found himself adjusting to a life that was completely different from the one he had known. He had spent years in a world of high-stakes business, where every decision was calculated and every move was planned in advance. But being around Lily and Olivia was nothing like that. There was no script, no strategy, just unpredictable, messy, and sometimes overwhelming moments that left him feeling more out of control than he ever had in his entire life. Ella had been cautious about letting him spend time with them, and he understood why. She was protective, and she had every right to be. He had missed 4 years of their lives, and trust wasn't something that could be built overnight. But he was determined to prove that he was serious, that he wasn't just showing up out of curiosity or guilt. He was here to stay. At first, his time with the twins was limited to short visits. He would come over in the afternoons, playing simple games with them in the backyard or sitting with them at the kitchen table while they colored. Lily warmed up to him quickly, asking endless questions about where he lived, what he did, and why he had never colored before. Olivia remained more reserved, watching him carefully, as if trying to figure out whether or not she could trust him. One afternoon, he arrived at Ella's house to find Lily waiting for him at the door, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Mommy said we can go to the park today," she announced before he even had a chance to say hello. Liam glanced at Ella, who stood behind her with a small, knowing smile. "As long as you think you can handle both of them," she said. Liam hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I think I can manage." Ella gave him a skeptical look but handed him the small backpack she had packed with snacks and extra clothes. "Good luck." Taking the twins to the park was unlike anything Liam had ever done before. He had been in control of boardrooms, had negotiated with some of the most powerful people in the world, but somehow, trying to keep up with 2 energetic 4-year-olds was more exhausting than any business deal he had ever closed. Lily ran ahead as soon as they arrived, climbing onto the jungle gym with ease, while Olivia took her time, watching the other kids before finally deciding to follow. Liam stayed close, making sure they were safe, but also realizing how little he knew about this world. He had never needed to think about playground rules, about making sure they didn't climb too high or wander too far. At one point, Lily called out to him. "Push me on the swing." He walked over and gently pushed her, watching as she kicked her legs, her laughter filling the air. Olivia stood nearby, watching quietly. "Do you want a turn?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I like the slide better." Liam nodded. "All right. Want me to go with you?" She studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. He followed her to the slide, watching as she climbed to the top and sat down. She hesitated just for a second before sliding down, landing on her feet and turning back to look at him. "Your turn," she said. Liam raised an eyebrow. "You want me to go down the slide?" Olivia giggled. Yes. Lily, who had overheard, ran over. You have to, Daddy. It's a rule. Liam froze. She had said it so naturally, so effortlessly, as if the word belonged to him. He felt his chest tighten, his heart pounding as he looked at her. She didn't seem to realize what she had said. Olivia didn't react either, as if it was completely normal. But for Liam, it was everything. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to smile. All right, he said, climbing up the small steps and sitting at the top of the slide. Here goes nothing. As he slid down, the twins burst into laughter, clapping their hands. Liam landed at the bottom, shaking his head. I think I might be too big for that. Lily giggled. No, you're not. Olivia grinned, her usual hesitation gone. You have to do it again. Liam laughed, shaking his head. How about we get ice cream instead? Both girls cheered at the suggestion, and as they ran ahead, Liam felt something shift inside him. For so long, he had believed that his life was complete, that he had everything he needed. But now, as he watched Lily and Olivia run toward the ice cream stand, he realized just how wrong he had been. He hadn't known what he was missing. But now, he did. And he wasn't going to lose it again. Liam was beginning to understand that being a father wasn't just about showing up. It was about being present, about learning the small details, the things that didn't seem important at first but made all the difference. It was about knowing that Lily liked her sandwiches cut into triangles while Olivia preferred squares. That Lily loved to talk, filling the silence with endless stories, while Olivia took her time, thinking through her words carefully before speaking. That they both hated the dark but would never admit it, always asking for just one more bedtime story to keep the lights on a little longer. He spent more and more time at Ella's house, his visits becoming less structured, more natural. At first, he had been cautious, waiting for Ella to give him permission to be involved, but slowly, things began to shift. She no longer hovered in the background, watching their every interaction. She no longer gave him that wary look, as if waiting for him to change his mind. And the twins, who had once seen him as a stranger, now ran to him the moment he walked through the door. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Olivia suddenly spoke up. Are you coming to my ballet recital? Liam, who had been in the middle of cutting Lily's spaghetti into smaller pieces, looked up. You're what? Ella sighed, giving Olivia a pointed look. We talked about this, sweetheart. We weren't sure if Daddy could make it. Liam's heart clenched at the word. They had talked about it. Which meant Olivia had asked for him. When is it? He asked, setting his fork down. Saturday, Olivia said immediately. Lily, who had been quiet for once, suddenly perked up. And my soccer game is on Sunday. Liam glanced at Ella, who was watching him carefully. You don't have to. I'll be there, he said firmly. Lily's face lit up, and Olivia gave a small, pleased nod. Ella, however, looked uncertain. Are you sure? I know weekends are usually. I'll be there, he repeated, this time looking directly at her. I don't care what I have to move around. I'm not missing it. That Saturday, Liam found himself sitting in a row of folding chairs inside a small dance studio, surrounded by parents who had clearly done this before. He felt out of place, uncomfortable in his suit, the only one not in casual clothes. But when the lights dimmed and the tiny ballerinas walked onto the stage, all of that disappeared. Olivia was easy to spot. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, and she wore a pale pink tutu, her little face serious with concentration. She moved carefully, hitting every mark with quiet precision, the complete opposite of the other girls who twirled around with carefree energy. Liam had never seen her so focused before, so determined. And when the performance was over and she spotted him in the audience, her whole face changed. She smiled. A real, wide, proud smile. He had never seen her smile like that before. When she ran to him after the show, he crouched down, bracing himself as she threw her arms around his neck. He held her tightly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You were amazing, Liv." She pulled back, looking up at him. "You really watched?" Liam frowned. "Of course I did." Olivia hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "I didn't think you'd come." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She hadn't believed he would show up. Liam swallowed, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I will always come when you need me, Olivia. Always." The next day, at Lily's soccer game, he sat on the sidelines with Ella, watching as their daughter ran across the field with boundless energy. Unlike Olivia, who was precise and careful, Lily played with reckless enthusiasm, throwing herself into every moment with full force. When she scored a goal, she turned to him immediately, grinning as she waved. He stood, clapping and cheering, and she beamed before running back to her teammates. "You're good at this," Ella said beside him. Liam turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "At what?" She gave him a small smile. "At being their dad." Something inside him softened. "I never thought I would be," he admitted. "I thought I wasn't capable of this. That I wouldn't know how to do it." Ella's gaze held his for a long moment. "But you do," she said quietly. Liam looked back at the field, watching as Lily ran up to Olivia on the sidelines, showing off as if she had just won a championship. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Liam had always thought of himself as a man who adapted quickly, someone who could walk into any situation and find a way to navigate it. But nothing could have prepared him for the slow, steady transformation happening in his life. He was no longer just a businessman or a CEO. He was becoming something more. He was becoming a father. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the big moments. It was in the little things. It was in the way Lily automatically reached for his hand when they crossed the street. It was in the way Olivia looked at him now, no longer guarded, but with quiet trust. It was in the sound of their laughter echoing through Ella's house when he tickled them on the couch. He found himself looking forward to every visit, to every bedtime story, to every new thing the girls wanted to show him. He learned that Lily loved superheroes and insisted she was going to be one when she grew up. Olivia, on the other hand, was obsessed with puzzles and would spend hours carefully fitting the pieces together, her focus so intense that even Lily's playful teasing couldn't break it. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, he walked into the kitchen where Ella was rinsing dishes. He leaned against the counter, watching her for a moment before speaking. "How long did you think I would stay?" he asked. Ella dried her hands with a towel before looking at him. "Honestly? I didn't know." Liam nodded slowly. "I don't blame you for that. I wasn't exactly reliable before." She studied him, her expression softening. "People change," she said. "You've changed." He let out a slow breath. "I didn't know I was capable of this," he admitted. "I didn't think I had it in me." Ella tilted her head slightly. "And now?" Liam glanced down the hallway toward the twins' room. "Now, I can't imagine my life without them." A small smile touched her lips. "Good," she said. "Because they can't imagine theirs without you anymore either." That truth hit him hard. He had gone from being a man who didn't believe in family to someone who couldn't bear the thought of being without his daughters. Later that night, as he was getting ready to leave, he heard a small voice from the hallway. "Daddy?" He turned, surprised to see Olivia standing there in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "What is it, sweetheart?" he asked, kneeling down. She hesitated before stepping forward, her little hands reaching for his shirt as she rested her forehead against his chest. "Can you stay?" Liam felt his throat tighten. He had spent years chasing things he thought mattered: power, money, influence. But in this moment, with his daughter sleepily holding on to him, he realized none of it compared to this. Yeah, Liv, he murmured, gently picking her up. I'll stay. And he knew, without a doubt, that he never wanted to leave again. Liam had never believed in fate, but sitting at Ella's kitchen table that morning, watching his daughters eat their breakfast with sleepy smiles and tangled hair, he wondered if some things were meant to happen. Maybe he was always supposed to find his way back to them. Maybe he had never really lost them, he had just been waiting for the right moment to step into their lives. Olivia sat quietly, carefully peeling the crust off her toast, her little fingers working with slow precision. Lily, on the other hand, was full of energy, swinging her feet under the table as she talked non-stop about a school project she was excited about. "Daddy, you have to help me," Lily announced, waving her spoon in the air. Liam raised an eyebrow. "Help you with what?" "We have to make a family tree," she said, her face lighting up. "And I want to put you on it." The words hit him like a shock, not because he didn't expect them, but because of how easily she had said it, how naturally she had included him. A few months ago, he had been a stranger. Now, he was her father in every way that mattered. Ella glanced at him, and he could see the way she was watching him carefully, waiting for his reaction. He gave her a small nod before turning back to Lily. "I'd love to help," he said, his voice steady. Lily grinned, satisfied with his answer, before turning back to her cereal. Olivia, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "Does that mean you're staying forever?" The question was simple, but Liam knew it carried more weight than Olivia realized. He set his coffee cup down, looking at both of them before shifting his gaze to Ella. He had already made his decision weeks ago, but now, sitting here with them, he knew it was time to say it out loud. "Yes," he said. "I'm staying forever." Lily cheered, her spoon clattering against the table as she threw her arms in the air. Olivia, more reserved as always, simply nodded, but the relief in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Ella exhaled softly, as if she had been holding her breath without realizing it. Later that evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Liam found Ella sitting on the porch, wrapped in a light sweater. He stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against his skin as he sat down next to her. "You meant it," she said quietly, not looking at him. "Yeah," he said, leaning back against the chair. "I did." Ella turned to him then, her blue eyes searching his face. "I spent so long thinking I had to do this alone," she admitted. "I thought if I let you in, it would just end in disappointment." Liam reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I'm not going anywhere, Ella." She studied him for a moment before nodding, her fingers tightening around his. For the first time, there was no hesitation, no lingering doubt. They had found their way back to each other, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And for the first time in his life, Liam Stanton knew exactly where he belonged. The ending of this story is both emotionally satisfying and deeply meaningful because it reflects real, gradual change rather than an instant resolution. Liam doesn't just step into his daughters' lives and immediately become the perfect father, he earns their trust, step by step, proving through actions rather than words that he's there to stay. His transformation isn't just about discovering that he has children, it's about realizing that love, family, and belonging are things he never knew he needed. What makes this conclusion so powerful is that it isn't built on dramatic declarations or grand gestures. Instead, it's the quiet moments, the bedtime stories, the school projects, the casual way the twins call him daddy, that truly cement Liam's place in their lives. He doesn't force his way in. He integrates into their world naturally, not because he has to, but because he chooses to. Ella's journey is just as important. She spent years believing she had to protect her daughters from disappointment, convinced that Liam wouldn't want to be a father. Watching her slowly lower her walls and trust him again adds another layer of depth to the story. It's not just about rekindling romance, it's about rebuilding faith in someone who had once been absent. The final scene, where Liam promises to stay, isn't just about words, it's about commitment. And by that point, it doesn't feel like a question anymore. It feels like a certainty. He has changed, not because he was forced to, but because he found something more meaningful than success or wealth. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about redemption, second chances, and the realization that the best things in life aren't planned. They're found in the most unexpected places, like a quiet coffee shop on an ordinary afternoon, where a man who thought he had everything discovers what truly matters. Alex Wallace was used to control. In business, in life, nothing ever caught him off guard. But as he sat in the dim glow of an upscale restaurant, savoring a rare moment of solitude, a quiet voice shattered his carefully constructed world. "Mister, do you have any spare change?" He looked up, expecting to see a stranger. Instead, standing before him was a little girl no older than 7, her deep brown eyes locked onto his with unsettling determination. In that moment, Alex had no idea that this simple question would unravel a past he never knew existed, and change his life forever. Alex Wallace sat at his usual table in the dimly lit, upscale restaurant, the quiet hum of conversation blending with the distant clinking of silverware and soft piano music. It was one of the few places in the city where he could eat in peace, away from the relentless demands of the business world. As CEO of one of the most powerful technology firms in the country, his life was a constant cycle of meetings, negotiations, and numbers. There was no time for anything else. Tonight was no different. The waiter had just placed a perfectly cooked steak in front of him, along with a glass of deep red wine. He barely acknowledged it, his mind elsewhere, processing the latest acquisition his company had finalized earlier that day. His world revolved around strategy and control, and in this world, there were no surprises. Or so he thought. A small shadow approached his table, pausing just within his peripheral vision. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was a waiter or someone passing by. But then, a soft voice broke through the low murmur of the restaurant. "Mister, do you have any spare change?" The words were unexpected, out of place in this setting. Alex blinked and looked up. Standing before him was a little girl, no older than 7, with long, dark brown hair falling over her small shoulders. Her large, deep brown eyes met his with a mix of quiet determination and hesitation. She was wearing a pastel pink t-shirt that looked slightly worn but clean. Alex's first instinct was to assume she was lost. This was not the kind of place where children wandered around asking for money. His second instinct was suspicion. A child begging in a restaurant like this didn't make sense. He set his fork down, his gaze sharpening. "Where are your parents?" The girl hesitated, shifting slightly on her feet. "I just need some change," she repeated, her voice softer this time, but still firm. There was something unsettling about the way she spoke. She wasn't pleading or desperate, like most panhandlers he had encountered before. She wasn't even looking at the food in front of him, as if hunger had nothing to do with her request. It was something else. "Sit down," Alex said, gesturing to the chair across from him. The girl hesitated, her small hands gripping the hem of her shirt. For a brief moment, he thought she might run, but then she slid into the chair, her posture stiff. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered quietly. "All right, Lily," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Why are you here? And don't tell me it's just for spare change." She lowered her gaze to the table, her fingers lightly tracing an invisible pattern on the white tablecloth. She was thinking, deciding how much to tell him. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Because I need to save my mom." Alex felt an unexpected weight settle in his chest. He had expected anything but that. His curiosity deepened, but more than that, something in the way she said those words struck him in a way he couldn't explain. "Save her from what?" he asked carefully. Lily swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's in the hospital. We don't have enough money to pay for her treatment. I thought, maybe if I asked people, I could get enough." Alex studied her, searching for any sign of deception, but there was none. She wasn't lying, he could see that. And the realization hit him harder than he expected. She had come into one of the most expensive restaurants in the city not because she was starving, not because she wanted to steal or cause trouble, but because she was trying to do the impossible. She was trying to save her mother. For the first time in a long time, Alex Wallace didn't know what to say. Alex sat in silence, watching the little girl in front of him. Lily stared down at the table, her small fingers tracing patterns on the linen cloth, waiting for his response. Her words still echoed in his mind. She wasn't here for herself. She wasn't here because she was hungry or because she had nowhere to go. She was here because she was trying to save someone else. He had spent years in boardrooms, negotiating with some of the most ruthless businessmen in the country. He had built an empire from the ground up, making decisions that affected thousands of people. Yet, in this moment, faced with a 7-year-old girl who had walked into a place she didn't belong, asking strangers for help, he felt completely unprepared. "How much do you need?" he asked finally, his voice calm but firm. Lily hesitated, her fingers stilling against the tablecloth. "I don't know," she admitted. "A lot. But if I keep asking, maybe I can get enough." Her answer hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't the desperation in her voice that unsettled him, because there wasn't any. It was the quiet resolve, the way she spoke as if she had already accepted the impossibility of what she was trying to do but was determined to do it anyway. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket, pulling out his wallet. He could have handed her a few $100s right there, enough to make a difference, at least for a little while. But something held him back. Giving her money would be the easiest solution, but it wouldn't answer the bigger question burning in his mind. "Where is your father?" he asked, his gaze steady. Lily's expression hardened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something close to anger in her eyes. "It's just me and my mom," she said shortly. "We don't need anyone else." Her reaction told him more than she probably realized. The way she clenched her small fists, the way her shoulders tensed, as if bracing for something, all of it pointed to one thing. Whoever her father was, he wasn't in the picture, and Lily had learned not to expect help from anyone. Alex exhaled slowly, choosing his next words carefully. "Which hospital is she in?" Lily hesitated again, but this time, she looked at him more closely. He could see her trying to figure out whether she could trust him. She had probably spent all evening approaching strangers, hoping for scraps of kindness, never knowing if someone would even listen. "Why do you want to know?" she asked cautiously. He leaned back slightly, not breaking eye contact. "Because I want to help." Lily studied him for a long moment. Why? It was a fair question. He had no reason to care. He could have given her money, wished her luck, and moved on with his night. That's what most people would have done. But something about her, about the way she carried herself, about the fact that a child this young was forced to take on a responsibility far too big for her, made it impossible to walk away. Instead of answering right away, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a single coin, placing it on the table between them. It was a silver dollar, one he had carried for years, more out of habit than anything else. "When I was a kid, someone once told me that sometimes, the smallest things can change everything," he said, watching her reaction. One decision, one moment, even one coin. Lily glanced at the coin but didn't touch it. Instead, she met his eyes, searching for something. Then, as if coming to a decision, she took a deep breath and whispered, "New York General." Alex nodded. He reached for his phone, quickly pulling up the location of the hospital. It wasn't in a good part of town, and the reviews were grim. Overcrowded, underfunded, the kind of place people ended up when they had no other options. "Come on," he said, standing up. "I'm taking you there." Lily's eyes widened, and she immediately scooted back in her chair. "No," she said quickly. "I can't go with you." Alex paused, then crouched down to her level so she wouldn't feel like he was towering over her. "Why not?" Lily glanced around the restaurant as if worried someone was watching. What if they don't let me see her again? They already said kids can't stay there overnight. That's why I had to leave. Her words sent a cold wave through him. She hadn't just come to this restaurant looking for money. She had come because she had nowhere else to go. Alex kept his voice steady, though inside, something twisted in his chest. I'll make sure that doesn't happen, he said. I won't let them keep you away from her. Lily didn't move right away. She stared at him, as if trying to read him, trying to decide if she could believe him. Then, finally, she gave a small nod. Okay. Alex stood, signaling the waiter as he pulled out a few bills and left them on the table. As they walked toward the exit, he glanced down at Lily. She walked with her head high, trying to look strong, but he could see the exhaustion in her steps, the weight of everything she had been carrying. She had come into this restaurant looking for spare change, thinking that was the only way she could help her mother. But what she didn't realize was that tonight, she had found something far more valuable. She had found him. And Alex Wallace had just made a silent promise to himself. No matter what it took, he was going to save them both. Alex held the car door open, waiting for Lily to climb in. She hesitated for a moment, gripping the edge of her t-shirt, her deep brown eyes flicking toward him with uncertainty. He could tell she wasn't used to trusting people, and he didn't blame her. She had spent who knows how long relying only on herself. But after a brief pause, she finally stepped forward and got into the passenger seat. As soon as the door closed, she pulled her seatbelt across her chest, fastening it with careful precision. It was such a small movement, but something about the way she did it struck Alex, like she had learned to be cautious in every aspect of her life, always making sure she did things right so she wouldn't be a burden. He slid into the driver's seat and started the car, the low hum of the engine breaking the silence. The city lights blurred past them as they pulled away from the restaurant, but Lily remained quiet. She sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Alex glanced at her before turning his attention back to the road. How long has your mom been in the hospital? He asked, keeping his voice calm. A while, Lily answered, her fingers tightening around each other. She was sick for a long time before that, but we didn't have money for doctors. Her answer sent a sharp wave of something through him, anger, sadness, something he couldn't quite name. He had spent his life in a world where problems had solutions, where money could fix almost anything. Yet, here was this little girl who had been forced to watch her mother get worse and worse, unable to do anything about it. You said they don't let you stay there, he said, carefully choosing his next words. Where have you been sleeping? Lily didn't answer right away. She looked down, tracing invisible patterns on her jeans, her lips pressing together. Sometimes at home, she finally admitted. Sometimes, not. The way she said it made his grip tighten around the steering wheel. He didn't need more details to know what she meant. She had been alone, sleeping wherever she could, while her mother was stuck in a hospital bed. He took a slow breath, trying to keep his frustration from showing. Do you have any other family? No, Lily said, shaking her head. It's just us. That was what he had been afraid of. If something happened to her mother, there would be no one. No safety net. No one to step in. And yet, despite all of it, she had still walked into that restaurant tonight with her head held high, determined to do something. Alex wasn't sure why that thought hit him so hard. He had spent years around people who would do anything for money, who would lie, cheat, manipulate for even a fraction of what he had. And yet here was this child, who had every reason to be angry at the world, choosing to fight for someone else instead of herself. He glanced at her again. How old are you, Lily? 7, she said, her voice small. 7. Too young to be carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Too young to be walking around the city alone, trying to save someone when no one had ever stepped up to save her. The rest of the drive was quiet. Alex could feel her glancing at him occasionally, as if still trying to figure out why he was doing this. He didn't have an answer for her. All he knew was that walking away hadn't been an option. When they pulled up in front of the hospital, Lily exhaled, her hands gripping the seatbelt strap. The building looked even worse up close. The fluorescent lights flickered above the entrance, and the automatic doors groaned slightly as they slid open. Alex stepped out of the car, waiting for Lily to do the same. She hesitated, then unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed out. As they walked toward the entrance, she suddenly reached out and grabbed the hem of his sleeve, just for a second. It was so quick that he barely had time to react before she let go, but it was enough. Enough for him to understand that, despite everything, she was still afraid. He didn't say anything about it. He just kept walking beside her, stepping into a world he had never been part of, a world where money couldn't erase the reality of what people like Lily and her mother had to go through. And for the first time in his life, he knew that no amount of money in the world would make him walk away from this. As Alex stepped into the hospital, the sharp scent of antiseptic and stale air filled his lungs. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting a cold, sterile glow over the worn-out linoleum floors. This place was nothing like the private hospitals he had seen in the past. Those were pristine, almost luxurious, where money bought comfort and discretion. Here, everything felt stretched thin, from the tired-looking nurses at the front desk to the crowded waiting area filled with people who had nowhere else to go. Lily walked beside him, her small frame barely making a sound as she led the way through the maze of hallways. She moved with quiet familiarity, her steps purposeful, as if she had done this 100 times before. The thought of that sent another sharp wave of unease through him. A child should never have to navigate a hospital alone. They reached a small room at the far end of the corridor. The door was slightly open, and inside, the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor filled the silence. Lily hesitated just outside, her fingers gripping the edge of her pink t-shirt. For the first time since she had approached him at the restaurant, she looked uncertain. Alex crouched beside her, lowering himself to her level. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded but didn't move. He could see the emotions flickering across her face, relief that they had made it here, fear of what she would see inside, and something deeper, something she was trying to hold back. "She doesn't know I left," Lily admitted in a whisper. "I didn't want her to worry." Alex exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of those words settle in his chest. This little girl had been carrying so much, making impossible choices with no one to guide her. He wanted to tell her that she didn't have to do this alone anymore, but he wasn't sure she would believe him just yet. Without another word, Lily took a breath and stepped inside. Alex followed her, his gaze immediately landing on the frail woman lying in the hospital bed. She looked young, far too young to be in this condition. Her dark brown hair was limp against the pillow, her skin pale, and there was a deep exhaustion in her face even as she slept. Despite the 4 lines and the machines surrounding her, she had a quiet kind of beauty, the kind that lingered even through hardship. Lily approached the bed carefully, climbing onto the chair beside it. She reached out and gently touched her mother's hand. "Mom," she said softly. The woman stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. It took her a moment to focus, but as soon as she saw Lily, a weak smile crossed her lips. "Hey, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "You came back." Lily nodded quickly. "I wanted to be here." Alex stood at the doorway, feeling like an outsider in a moment that wasn't his. But then, the woman's gaze shifted, and as soon as she looked at him, something in her expression changed. Her smile faded, her breath catching in her throat. Alex felt his own body tense as recognition flickered in her tired eyes. He knew her. Not just from this moment, not just as Lily's mother. "Sophie," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her lips parted slightly, and for a second, she looked as if she might not say anything at all. Then, with effort, she exhaled and whispered back, "Alex." Lily looked between them, confused. "You know each other?" Neither of them answered right away. Alex took a slow step forward, his mind racing to catch up with what was happening. Sophie. The woman he had once known. The woman who had vanished from his life without a trace. And now, after all these years, she was lying in a hospital bed, fragile and worn down, with a daughter who had been forced to beg strangers for help. His daughter. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, knocking the air from his lungs. Lily was his. Sophie turned away slightly, as if she couldn't meet his eyes. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she murmured. Alex swallowed hard, trying to keep his emotions in check. "Neither did I." There was so much he wanted to ask, so many questions clawing at the back of his mind. Why did she leave? Why hadn't she told him? How had she ended up here, struggling alone with no one to help her? But right now, none of that mattered as much as the little girl sitting beside her, watching them both with wide, questioning eyes. Sophie's fingers curled weakly around Lily's hand. "You didn't tell me where you went," she said softly to her daughter. Lily looked down, guilt flickering across her face. "I was trying to help," she admitted. "I went to find money." Sophie's eyes filled with something close to pain. "Lily, you can't do that. You can't just go off alone." "I had to," Lily insisted. "You needed me to." Her voice wavered at the end, and for the first time since Alex had met her, she looked like a child, scared, overwhelmed, and desperate for someone to tell her she had done the right thing. Sophie's gaze shifted back to Alex, searching his face, as if trying to figure out why he was here, why he had followed Lily instead of walking away. "Did you bring her?" she asked. Alex nodded. "She came to me," he said simply. "I wasn't going to let her do this alone." Something in Sophie's expression softened, but there was still wariness there. She looked as if she wanted to say more, but she was too tired, too weak. Alex glanced at the machines beside her, at the 4 in her arm, at the chart resting at the foot of her bed. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Sophie hesitated. "It's complicated." "Then explain it to me." She exhaled, clearly reluctant, but finally, she whispered, "Heart failure. They say I need surgery. But we don't have the money for it." Alex felt his stomach drop. He had spent his life signing contracts worth millions, investing in projects that cost more than entire hospitals. And here she was, the woman he had once loved, the mother of his child, lying in a hospital bed because she couldn't afford to get the care she needed. And she hadn't even asked for his help. "I can fix that," he said, his voice steady. "I'll cover everything." Sophie's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected that. "Alex." "I'm not asking," he interrupted, his tone firm. "You need this surgery. You're going to get it." A long silence stretched between them. Lily looked up at her mother. "Please, Mom," she whispered. "Let him help." Sophie looked between them, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to argue. But then, something in her face crumbled. She nodded. Alex exhaled, feeling a tension in his chest finally loosen. He wasn't sure where this road would lead, what answers he would get, or how they would even begin to untangle the years of silence between them. But one thing was certain. He wasn't leaving this time. Alex sat in the hospital chair beside Sophie's bed, watching as she drifted in and out of sleep. The weight of everything that had happened in the last few hours pressed down on him, filling the room with an unspoken tension. Lily sat curled up in the chair next to her mother, her small hand resting lightly on Sophie's arm, as if she was afraid to let go. He still couldn't wrap his head around the reality of it all. Sophie was here, in this hospital, struggling, while he had spent years believing she had simply chosen to walk away from him. And Lily, his daughter, had been out on the streets, begging strangers for money, while he had been living in luxury, oblivious to the fact that he had a child at all. The thought made his stomach twist. A quiet knock on the door broke the silence, and Alex turned to see a nurse step inside, holding a clipboard. She looked tired, her scrub slightly wrinkled, but her expression softened when she saw Lily sitting beside her mother. "She's stable for now," the nurse said in a hushed tone, her eyes flicking to Sophie's sleeping form. "But without surgery, her condition will keep getting worse. I saw the payment authorization come through. Are you really covering the cost?" Alex nodded without hesitation. "Yes. Whatever she needs." The nurse studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand why a man in an expensive suit was suddenly taking responsibility for a patient in an overcrowded hospital. But she didn't question it. Instead, she nodded and scribbled something on her clipboard. "I'll make sure everything is expedited," she said. "The sooner we get her into surgery, the better." "Thank you," Alex said, his voice quieter than usual. The nurse gave him a small, understanding smile before slipping out of the room, leaving him alone with Lily and the sound of Sophie's steady breathing. For a long moment, neither he nor Lily spoke. She sat in the chair, her legs pulled up against her chest, her brown eyes fixed on her mother's face. She looked so small in that moment, so much like a child who had spent too long pretending to be strong. Alex leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Lily," he said gently. She turned to him, her expression wary, as if bracing for something. "I didn't know about you," he admitted, his voice rougher than he intended. "If I had, things would have been different." Lily looked at him for a long moment, then glanced down at her hands. "Mom never talked about you," she said quietly. "I didn't even know your name until today." The words stung more than they should have, but Alex forced himself to stay calm. "Did she ever tell you why?" Lily shook her head. "I think she was sad about it. I used to ask if I had a dad, but she always changed the subject." Alex exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. He had so many questions, but Lily wasn't the person who could answer them. Sophie was the only one who could tell him why she had disappeared, why she had kept their daughter a secret, why she had chosen to struggle alone instead of reaching out to him. But looking at Lily now, he realized that none of those questions mattered as much as the one thing he knew for sure: she needed him now, and he wasn't going to fail her. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a moment. Lily nodded hesitantly. "How long have you been doing this? Asking for money?" She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "A little while," she admitted. "Mom didn't know. I didn't want her to worry." Alex's jaw tightened. He had spent his life in boardrooms, negotiating deals worth billions, yet here was his own daughter, forced to beg for scraps because no one else had been there to help her. "You don't have to do that anymore," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "I'm here now. You won't have to worry about money ever again." Lily looked at him again, her expression unreadable. "Are you going to stay?" The question caught him off guard. He could see the real meaning behind it, the fear, the uncertainty. She had lived her whole life without him, and now, suddenly, he was here, making promises. She wanted to believe him, but she had no reason to trust that he wouldn't leave just as suddenly as he had appeared. Alex leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze head-on. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily didn't say anything right away. But after a long pause, she gave a small nod, as if she was allowing herself to believe him just a little. That was enough for now. Alex sat back in his chair, glancing at Sophie again. She looked so fragile lying there, a shadow of the woman he had once known. He didn't know how they were going to untangle all the pain and silence between them, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to let her go through this alone. And he wasn't going to let Lily grow up thinking she had to fight the world by herself. For the first time in his life, Alex Wallace had something more important than business deals and corporate power. He had a daughter. And he was going to do whatever it took to make up for the years he had lost. Alex didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the hospital room, watching over Sophie and Lily, letting the weight of everything settle in. Every so often, a nurse would come in to check Sophie's vitals, adjusting the Ford drip or making a note on the chart at the foot of her bed. Each time, Alex would glance at the clock, calculating the hours until the surgery. The wait felt endless, and for the first time in a long time, he felt powerless. Lily had eventually fallen asleep in the chair beside her mother, curled up with her knees tucked under her chin. She had tried to fight it, insisting she wasn't tired, but exhaustion had won. Now, in sleep, she looked even younger, her face free of the worry that she had carried with her when she first approached him. The thought made his chest tighten. No child should have to bear that kind of responsibility, especially alone. As dawn crept in through the small hospital window, Alex finally stood and stretched, his body aching from sitting in the stiff chair all night. He stepped out into the hallway, pulling out his phone. He had ignored dozens of emails and missed calls from his assistant, his team, and business partners. For once, none of it mattered. He dialed a number, bringing the phone to his ear. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Alex? Do you know what time it is?" "I need you to do something for me, Mike," Alex said, ignoring the question. Mike Henderson was one of the best private investigators Alex had ever worked with. He had helped uncover everything from corporate fraud to high-profile scandals, but this was personal. Mike sighed on the other end. "This isn't about business, is it?" "No," Alex admitted. "It's about someone I used to know. Someone I should have known about a long time ago." Mike was silent for a moment, then his tone shifted. "What do you need?" "I need everything you can find on Sophie Miller," Alex said. "Medical records, financial records, where she's been for the last 7 years. I need to know why she never came to me. Why she never told me about Lily." There was another pause before Mike spoke again. "Alex, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes the truth isn't what we want it to be." Alex exhaled, running a hand over his face. "I don't care what the truth is. I just need to know." "All right," Mike said. "I'll start digging." Alex hung up and leaned against the wall, his mind racing. He had spent years believing Sophie had left because she wanted to, because she had chosen to disappear from his life. But now, after seeing her like this, after seeing what Lily had been forced to do to survive, he wasn't so sure anymore. A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You're still here." He turned to see Sophie watching him from the bed, her voice weak but steady. She looked at him with tired, searching eyes, as if trying to figure out if he was real or just a lingering dream. "Of course, I'm still here," Alex said, stepping back into the room. Sophie's gaze flickered to Lily, still asleep in the chair beside her. A mix of emotions crossed her face: love, sadness, guilt. "She told you everything, didn't she?" Alex pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not everything," he said. "Just enough to know that I should have been here a long time ago." Sophie looked away, her fingers gripping the thin hospital blanket. "I didn't want it to be like this," she admitted. "I didn't want you to find out this way." Alex leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Then how did you want me to find out, Sophie? Or was I never supposed to?" She closed her eyes briefly, then looked back at him. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared. You were building your company, making a name for yourself. I thought if I told you, you'd feel trapped, like you had to choose between your future and us." Alex clenched his jaw, trying to keep his emotions in check. "You don't get to decide that for me," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. "You don't get to decide that I wouldn't have wanted to be there." Sophie flinched slightly but didn't argue. "I know," she whispered. "I know that now. But back then. I was young, I was stupid, and I thought I was protecting you. And then, when things got hard, when I wanted to reach out, I convinced myself it was too late. That you had moved on." Alex exhaled, rubbing his temples. Sophie, I would have done anything. I would have taken care of you both. I know, she said again, tears welling in her eyes. But by the time I realized that, I didn't know how to fix it. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words and years of lost time. Finally, Alex looked at her, his voice steady. It's not too late now. Sophie blinked, looking up at him. What? I'm here, he said simply. And I'm not going anywhere. For you, for Lily. I'm not going to let you go through this alone anymore. Sophie let out a shaky breath, as if the weight she had been carrying for years had suddenly become too much. I don't know how to let you help, she admitted. Alex reached for her hand, gently but firmly. Then let me show you. For the first time in years, Sophie didn't push him away. She didn't argue, didn't tell him he didn't have to do this. She simply nodded, her fingers tightening around his, as if for the first time, she was allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to fight this battle alone. Alex stayed with Sophie and Lily as the hospital staff prepared for surgery. The morning passed in a blur of doctors coming in and out, explaining procedures, checking vitals, and ensuring everything was in place. Sophie listened, nodding when necessary, but Alex could tell she was exhausted. She had spent so long fighting on her own, pushing through without anyone to lean on, and now, suddenly, she wasn't alone anymore. He wondered if that scared her more than the surgery itself. Lily never left her mother's side. She held Sophie's hand tightly, her small fingers curled around her mother's wrist, as if afraid that letting go would make everything fall apart. Every now and then, she would glance at Alex, as if trying to reassure herself that he was still there, that he wasn't just another person who would disappear. When the time came, a nurse wheeled Sophie's bed toward the surgery wing. Lily held on to her mother's hand until the very last moment, until the doors swung shut behind them, leaving only silence. The little girl stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the doors as if willing them to open again. Alex knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. She's going to be okay, he said gently. Lily swallowed hard, her lower lip trembling. What if she's not? Alex didn't hesitate. Then we'll fight for her, he said. Together. Lily turned to look at him, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have been enough, because after a long moment, she nodded and took a deep breath, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. They sat together in the waiting area, the minutes stretching into hours. Alex had spent years in high-pressure situations, sitting in boardrooms, negotiating deals worth billions, but this was different. This was the first time in a long time that he truly felt like something important was at stake. At some point, Lily curled up in her chair, resting her head against his arm. She was still too guarded to ask for comfort outright, but Alex understood. He let her stay like that, his arm lightly draped around her small shoulders. A familiar voice pulled him from his thoughts. Alex. He looked up to see Mike Henderson standing a few feet away, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket. He must have come straight from his latest job, and the look on his face told Alex that he had found something. Alex carefully shifted, making sure not to wake Lily, then stood and motioned for Mike to follow him a few steps away. Tell me what you found. Mike glanced toward Lily before lowering his voice. Sophie's been through hell, he said. After she left, she struggled. She bounced between jobs, barely making enough to stay afloat. Then, about 3 years ago, she got sick. She must have known something was wrong, but without insurance, she didn't go to a doctor until it was too late. Alex clenched his jaw. He had assumed Sophie had walked away and built a life without him, but the truth was much worse. She hadn't just left, she had been fighting to survive. Why didn't she ask for help? Alex muttered, more to himself than to Mike. Mike exhaled. Pride? Fear? Maybe she thought you wouldn't want to hear from her after all these years. Or maybe she thought she could handle it on her own. Alex shook his head, running a hand through his hair. She shouldn't have had to. Mike studied him for a moment. You can't change the past, Alex. But you can be there now. Alex nodded, his chest tight with emotions he wasn't ready to unpack. I will be. Mike gave him a pat on the shoulder before stepping back. Call me if you need anything else. As Mike walked away, Alex took a deep breath and returned to his seat beside Lily. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He looked down at her, feeling something shift inside him. He had spent his whole life chasing success, building an empire, convincing himself that power and control were all that mattered. But none of it had ever felt like this. None of it had ever made him feel like he belonged somewhere. He wasn't just here for Sophie's surgery. He wasn't just here because he felt guilty or obligated. He was here because this was his family. And for the first time, he knew exactly what he was fighting for. Hours passed in tense silence. Every time the doors to the surgical wing swung open, Alex's eyes flicked up, searching for any sign of news. Lily sat beside him, quiet but visibly restless, her small hands gripping the sleeves of her sweater. She had stopped asking how much longer it would take, as if she had already learned that waiting never came with easy answers. Alex had never felt this kind of helplessness before. He was a man of action, someone who solved problems, fixed things, controlled outcomes. But here, in this cold waiting room, he had no control at all. He could sign off on any medical bill, get the best doctors in the world, but none of it changed the fact that Sophie was in surgery, and there was nothing he could do to help her right now. Lily let out a quiet sigh and leaned against his arm again. She had barely spoken in the past hour, but her presence alone was enough to remind him of what was at stake. He wasn't just waiting for Sophie's recovery. He was waiting for the moment he could finally give Lily the security she had never had. Finally, the doors opened, and a doctor in surgical scrubs stepped out. Alex and Lily both sat up at the same time, their breaths catching. The doctor approached them, his expression calm but serious. The surgery was successful, he said. Sophie is stable. She'll need time to recover, but she made it through. Lily let out a small gasp, and before Alex could react, she threw her arms around him. It was the first time she had reached for him, the first time she had allowed herself to let go of her walls, even just for a moment. Alex wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. She's okay, he murmured. She's going to be okay. Lily sniffed against his shirt, nodding quickly. I was so scared, she whispered. I know, Alex said softly. Me too. The doctor gave them a moment before continuing. She'll be moved to a recovery room soon. She'll be groggy for a while, but you can see her. Lily pulled away, wiping at her eyes. Can we go now? Alex looked at the doctor, who nodded. They'll be bringing her out soon. When they were finally allowed into the room, Sophie looked pale and exhausted, but she was awake. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard them come in, and the first thing she saw was Lily rushing to her side. Mom, Lily breathed, grabbing her hand. Sophie's lips curved into a weak smile. Hey, baby. Her voice was hoarse, but there was warmth in it, relief in her tired eyes. Alex stood near the foot of the bed, watching as mother and daughter reunited. There was something deeply humbling about the moment, about witnessing the sheer love between them, a love that had endured through every hardship. Sophie's gaze finally shifted to him, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other. You really stayed, she murmured. Alex stepped closer, his voice firm but gentle. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. Sophie let out a shaky breath, nodding slightly. Thank you. It wasn't just gratitude for the surgery or the money. It was for being here, for being part of this, for not running when the truth had finally come out. Lily turned to him, still holding her mother's hand. We're going to be okay now, right? Alex crouched down beside her, meeting her gaze. Yeah, he said. We are. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt in his mind. He had spent his whole life chasing the idea of success, believing that power and wealth would make him whole. But nothing had ever felt as right as this moment, standing here, knowing that he had something real to fight for. He wasn't just fixing a mistake from the past. He was building a future. For Sophie. For Lily. For their family.